So you want to know the truth about witchcraft. Well, let's get a few things straight right from the beginning. First of all, forget everything you've heard and seen about the typical witch. The modern witch is not the old cackling hen with a wart on her nose. It isn't even necessary for her to have long, black, stringy hair to get into the Witches' Guild, and even if she were possessed of these qualities, she'd probably have a face job and remedy the hairdo with a quickie at Bruce's the Coiffeur. The modern witch also doesn't ride a broomstick. She may not even own a cat, black or otherwise, who in private life could be her lover. That stereotype witch for all practical purposes is dead, thank God or Satan, depending on which side of the cauldron you're standing. If what you were looking for from this album was a couple of frightening screams and some ghost stories about the blonde-haired Lady Eleanor, who while walking down her garden path suddenly disappears into a bank of fog, only to reappear in a magical stage setting of witchcraft, you've just had your first bad piece of luck from a witch, because you just blew a lot of money on this album. But at least it's probably the first time you've been screwed by a witch. And I am a witch. Oh yes, most definitely. A real live witch. And though I'm certainly going to tell you a lot of unusual things, putting chills up and down your spine isn't the goal of this album. What I've got in mind for you is a trip into the witchcraft world, the modern witchcraft world, a world populated with normal-looking, average-acting people who just happen to be witches and warlocks, and who happen to have everyday dealings with imps and cadavers, poltergeists and spirits, potions and hexes, and it's all real. You say it couldn't be in this day and age? Don't kid yourself. Listen to a typical conversation I had with one of my girlfriends.
Hello?
Hello, Sister Witch. How you doing?
Oh, darling, how are you?
Fine.
Did you get Lucy's message?
No, but I had the feeling that you've been burning candles for me, and you've been wanting me to call. As a matter of fact, it's been nagging at me, so I thought I'd better call and let you know.
I talked to Lucy last night, and I told her, I said, if you hear from that Barbara, I said, you tell her if she doesn't call me pretty soon, I'm going to burn black candles. No, really? I told her I'd psych you out.
Well, where do you think I've been?
I haven't even tried. I just figured it's none of my business. I just tuned out.
Yes, you know, which really kind of upset me. I was going to keep Martin, but I found out that Martin is practicing black witchcraft.
I thought so. He had the aura all around him, Barbara. I could pick it up.
As a matter of fact, he told me that he was going into blood rituals. So I had to stay completely away from him.
Even Deborah said that she picked up that he was just getting too evil.
Yes.
And Deborah's got a real nice boyfriend now.
Oh, she does?
But I'm afraid, she says she thinks he's, just an ordinary mortal, but
yeah,
maybe not. It's hard to tell.
Well, only time will tell. She can always change that if she wants.
Yeah, right.
And then, as modern women do, we started talking about evil rooms.
You should put a vase of graveyard dust in the room.
Oh, really?
It'll take all the evilness out.
What about one that's got an active one in it? My daughter's room up near Kaipa's got one in it. I saw it yesterday.
So that's what you should do. You should put graveyard dust in the room.
Well, I told her to talk to him and telling him just to turn around and look if there was people, waiting right there to take him over. Then he's just earthbound.
Uh-huh.
And I was hoping maybe it'll work. Because I've done that with some of them, and finally they do turn around and they look, and then they go ahead and go. But
there was so much evil that came in with him.
Yeah.
And there was so much evil in his room that it would be ice cold constantly. And the room would hum.
Oh, boy. That's bad.
And you know that when we started selling the artifacts, the imp that I had began to take vengeance out on me and was biting me. And I would wake up with big bite marks on my body.
Oh,
and it cut my fingers. Every time I touched the coffin, it would cut me. And there's nothing in that coffin to cut me.
Yeah.
My fingers were all cut up. It didn't want to be sold.
Yeah.
So I still own it, and so it's fine now.
How'd you get it in the first place?
I bought it from some people that didn't give me very much information about it. But once I bought it, then they wanted it back.
I don't think I care for one of those.
Well, I'm not frightened of death, and it's just sort of, to me,
No,
it
I mean the imp.
Oh, the imp. Oh, I really don't want it either, but it seems like it goes with the coffin, and I'll have it until I get rid of the coffin, and the coffin I want, so I put up with the imp.
Yeah.
It's been banging it's been banging and clanging around here in the apartment at night. It got real angry about it last week and threw itself on the floor. But so long as it doesn't bother anyone, particularly, that's all that matters. Once it starts getting vicious, then I guess I will have to get rid of my coffin.
Just two modern women gossiping to each other, but gossiping about witchcraft. You see, there are witches. 3 different kinds, as a matter of fact. I'm a gray witch. You've never heard of a gray witch? Quite possible. Most mortals think there is only one kind of witch. That's because dictionaries generally have one definition which usually goes something like this: an ugly woman who enjoys spiritual powers through a contract she has made with the devil. That's like saying there's only one definition of a doctor, or a fish. At best, that definition would only describe one kind of witch, the black witch. As a gray witch, I can assure you I've made no pact with the devil. And, hang on to your wolfsbane now, the white witch won't have anything to do with the devil. In fact, she worships God. That's right, God. That big good spirit in the sky, in whose name so many witches have been burned alive. But I'll tell you more about the different flavors that witchcraft comes in later. Back to those grand old men of the dictionaries. If you think they treated witches bad, wait till you hear what they did, or I should say didn't do, to warlocks. Most modern dictionaries don't even list them. By their omission, it would seem that these men are telling us warlocks have never and don't presently exist, right? Wrong. Unsophisticated dictionaries, written as early as 1721, state that a warlock is,
quote, one in league with the devil and possessing occult and evil powers, the male equivalent of witch, end quote.
And the man who just read that quote should know. He's a gray warlock. His name is J.C. You'll be hearing a lot more from J.C. as this album goes on. You see, they weren't killed off by little economy cars, polluted water, and smog. They're just as much alive today as you and I. But you should only count on yourself, because I'm a witch, remember? Witchcraft is the oldest religion in existence. Before anyone was reading or writing anything, incantation and potions were being used against enemies. Drawings on European caves date back to the beginning of man. Symbols of witchcraft have been found from every race and from every nation of the world. Yet despite all this evidence, mortals are still suffering from a total lack of, or completely mixed-up knowledge of, is there ain't to witchcraft. Even though I've recently lectured in colleges, high schools, and believe it or not, some open-minded churches have invited me to speak to interested members of their congregation. But to be truthful, this is hardly typical of the reaction most churches have about witchcraft. The remarks of one Lutheran minister in Southern California probably reveals more about the church's true feelings. Without revealing my identity, I said that a girlfriend had told me that a woman could sometimes be born a witch. The Reverend took a second and a half for deep thought and gave me his reply, which J.C. will quote.
She's clear off her rocker.
I, being unaccustomed to such quick and authentic answers, repeated, she's off her rocker, and the Reverend added to his theory.
Clear off her rocker. She's battier than the bat in the belfry. She's fruitier than a fruitcake.
Impressed with the lack of cliches in his answers, I bore on. My girlfriend says she's a black witch. The Reverend took a deep breath, filled with concern, leaned close to the mouthpiece, and J.C. again quotes.
Is she black?
I assured him that this was her classification, not her color, and he was relieved enough to continue. After much denial of witchcraft and devil worship, the Reverend suddenly revealed.
Our boy took a course in Satan work, and I preached 5 sermons on the subject. It's entirely too complicated for any uneducated person to fluff off and say you're a witch. The devil is too complicated. But I do believe there are 2 forces in the world today, and I believe in the devil.
I then said that, like the Reverend, my girlfriend also believes in the devil.
She doesn't know. She has no way of knowing. Anyone who says they know it, they're dummies. Nobody with an education would ever think to know it. The fact that she claims she knows indicates she's off her rocker.
I'm not exactly sure what that means, but it sounds like if you've had a formal education and say you believe in the devil, it's okay. Otherwise, it's clear you're off your rocker. All of those statements were actual quotes from this Reverend's advice to me. Built on logic like this, you can see why the churches are having trouble. And apparently this good Reverend, like many of his brethren, doesn't remember that churches and churchmen have acknowledged the existence of magical power. The Catholic Church has always recognized the fact that a person can be possessed by the devil. They even wrote into the Church's articles of canon law, Articles 11, 51, 52, and 53, which describes how to hold an exorcism ceremony to free a possessed person. And on the other side of the cross, Martin Luther let fly an inkwell at a demon who was bugging him. And no less than Reverend Samuel Wesley, father of the founder of the Methodist faith, invited a spirit out into the alley for a punch in the mouth. It's all there in their history, but churches refuse to accept it. But that's their problem, not mine. While church membership goes down, witchcraft membership goes up. It's getting bigger and healthier by the day, and it won't stop because young people are just discovering it. They're discovering it as an alternative to the other avenues they've exhausted. They've been to their parents for help. They've tried the church, but you've just heard how open-minded the church is. Young people have also tried the government and politicians and drugs, but they've always come up empty. These people, dissatisfied mentally and spiritually, are turning to witchcraft. I should interject a word of caution here against one particular phase of black witchcraft, which has recently received a lot of national attention, and that's their use of drugs. The black witchcraft realm allows the use of drugs, and almost anything else. And many young people are turning to it, not because of the witchcraft, but because of the drugs. And that's a cheap cop-out. That isn't witchcraft, that's drug addiction. You cannot develop your mind where I'll try and lead you if it's bogged down and blown apart by drugs or the heavy use of alcohol. This may come as a big surprise to many of you, but most witchcraft demands that you be clean. You'll automatically go on your own personal highs, and this is not through hypnosis. This high comes through a new power. You'll turn on your inner self. You'll literally explode into hundreds of brilliant mental pieces, and none of them will be artificially produced. Because witchcraft, especially gray witchcraft, demands mental development beyond the concepts of most mortals. You'll actually be using upwards of 35% of your brain instead of the 10% that most mortals coast through life using. There are many rewards awaiting you in witchcraft, and you'll be able to enjoy most of them here in this life. That's one of the reasons for the popularity of witchcraft. You won't have to wait for death to see if you've been good. Because though witchcraft deals frequently with the other life, it's primarily for immediate use. It can give you beauty and prosperity, health, sexual happiness. There are many potions and rituals designed to help you in these areas. I can't guarantee success, but within a very short time, you'll be able to decide whether you're achieving these goals or not. There's nothing else around that makes you an offer like this. If you don't think it's working for you, forget it. What I'd like to do in this album is explain quite calmly all about modern witchcraft, and through a series of tests, we'll eventually find out if you could be a witch or warlock. But remember this, even if it turns out you're just a mortal, you can still practice witchcraft, and with a little training get awfully good at it. Based on my own research, which is admittedly limited, but national researchers are awfully slow on witchcraft polls, I feel 1 out of every 10 people in the United States practices witchcraft. Oh, right away I hear you say, listen, out of all my friends, none of them look or act like a witch or warlock, which only proves my point. See? You've fallen for our Hollywood image, too, because some of the nicest people you'll ever want to meet are practicing witchcraft. In fact, you may already know many of them.
I'll only use my middle name, Robert. I'm 43, and I'm a white warlock. I've communicated with God since I was 6, and I've cured several incurable illnesses and have predicted many things. I use my mental powers in my work and have made a lot of money for many of my clients. I'm vice president of a large stock brokerage firm.
My name is Stella. I live in the southwest part of the United States. I'm happily married. I have 3 children. I'm the president of my local PTA, and I'm a gray witch.
I'm Conrad. I'm the vice president of a large bank in Chicago. I'm also the high priest of a black coven.
Surprise you? It shouldn't. Anyone can be a witch or warlock, and more than you think are. We just don't dress to fit the last horror film that blew through town. Your girlfriend next door might be worshiping a cadaver and have an imp at her calling. Your rosy-cheeked pastor might moonlight giving black masses. You say you'd know? My first husband didn't know I was a witch for 2 years of marriage. I'd always been afraid he wouldn't understand. When I finally told him, he didn't disappoint me. 2 months later, we were divorced. Have you ever thought about your mate being a witch or warlock? Are they restless at night? Does he sometimes know what you're going to say before you say it? Has it ever sounded like she was talking to someone, but when you walked in, she was by herself? Only 1 out of 500 people will admit to practicing witchcraft, even to relatives or close friends, and for good reason. But that's going to change. Witches and warlocks are tired of being persecuted and hiding. We've been doing it for thousands of years. But the times are changing.
This is a place at this point where egos should be laid on the line and people should stand up for a cause.
That's right. And you know what we feel? We feel, Dale, JC and I feel that if we make a path and we open the first door, then it's going to give a chance for all the other witches and warlocks in the world to finally come out and stand up for what they believe in and stop being condemned.
See, witches and warlocks get emotional too. Being better understood and accepted in modern society is a common goal, and there are many witches and warlocks burning candles, hoping for your understanding. And now, what about you? Could you be a witch or warlock? You may think it strange a person like yourself, sensible, kind, and good-looking, could go through life without knowing if you're a witch or warlock. But most people don't know until they contact someone in a realm of witchcraft and are put through a series of tests. I'd guess that 1 out of every 1,000 people are born a witch or warlock. So you've got a slight chance. And since you bought this album, you must think you've got a chance too. Now let's get down to the exciting business of determining if you are or if you ain't. I'll be your guide. I'll lead you to the magic spot where you will decide if you are a witch or warlock. It's your decision. Now there's a lot of questions to be answered before you can decide. Don't be discouraged if your answers don't come the first time you hear the questions. There are no right or wrong answers. You may have to listen 6 or 7 times before your mind can be coaxed to reach back through the years for a piece of the puzzle, but it's worth it. Try listening to this part by yourself, at midnight. The stroke of midnight is limbo. It's the end and the beginning. It's when your mind and your body offers the least resistance. And burn a large white candle on a red candle holder near your phonograph. On either side of the candle, burn orange blossom incense in gold incense burners. Wear a loose, flowing white robe. White is the color of spiritualism, purification, and mind-searching. You should wear nothing under the robe so that your body will be totally relaxed and receptive. You must not drink or smoke as you listen. Your mind must be totally occupied with my voice. Now lean back and relax, and don't be afraid. I'll be your guide. Everything you'll discover has already been. Let the days that were turn back. Look for the child that you once were. Find the earliest memories of your mind. That's where you began, and that's where we'll begin. Is there a history of witchcraft in your immediate family? Aunt, uncle, a strange cousin? If the answer is yes, you're off to a flying start. In my case, my 2nd generation and my 4th generation grandmothers on my father's side were both witches, and they were burned at the stake to prove it. There are certain physical signs that are sometimes clues, but they are not in any way conclusive answers. Being born with eyes of different colors, birthmarks shaped like a crucifix, 2-toned hair, being born the 7th child of the 7th child. My 2nd generation grandmother looked just like my 4th generation grandmother, and my facial features are exactly the same as my grandmother's. A coincidence? Maybe. But both of these women were under 5 feet tall, weighed 90 pounds, were born albinos, and so was I. After the 2nd week of life, each of us had our eyes turned from pink to blue. Based on these facts, I know I am the reincarnation of my grandmothers. And this isn't as strange as it first sounds. Even the Bible makes several references to reincarnation. Jesus hit Nicodemus with a line that was, "No man ascended up to heaven, but he that came down from heaven." Jeremiah said God had told him that he had been on earth before in somebody else's body. Sounds like a little reincarnation, doesn't it? So if you've got the reincarnation chills, don't worry about it. It's real, and a lot of people are beginning to turn on to it. Now think back. Were you an exceptional child?
Do you have memories of an unusually early age?
Did you walk when you were still quite young?
Did you talk when you were still quite young?
As a child, were you unusually bright?
Were you born with a photographic memory?
Were you constantly told you seem a lot older than your age? You might be centuries older. Though I didn't have a photographic mind as a child, I was unique in several other ways. I was walking and talking by the time I was a year old, and at the age of 3, after visiting my grandmother's house, I started crying. My mother asked me why, and I told her, "Grandma's going to die tomorrow." Though they certainly tried, no one could convince me otherwise, and my grandmother did die the next day. I have also foreseen the death in my family of an uncle, an aunt, and a stepsister. When I still was quite young, relatives who had died before I was born began to appear and talk to me. My grandfather on my father's side was the first. Like most children, I was known to be pretty destructive. Because of this, a family album was always kept under lock and key. So when I woke up in the middle of the night and found a man I'd never seen before sitting at the end of my bed, I was more than a little shook. He asked if I knew who he was. I said no, and I asked if my daddy knew he was there. He said no and told me he was my grandfather. He was very pleasant, and I sat up as we talked. I remember he told me a story which made me laugh. Then he said he had to go and asked if he could tuck me in. As he pulled the covers around me, he gave me a tickle and then a light kiss. His touch was very warm. In the morning, I told my parents about talking with Grandpa. They didn't pay any attention to me till I described him. Then my dad looked surprised and got our family album. He showed me a picture and asked if that was a man. I said it was, and he got very angry and said that was my grandfather who had died before I was born. My dad told me never to talk about it again, and so I didn't. But my grandfather continued to visit me for years. If your childhood is dotted with similar examples, there's a good chance you were born a witch or warlock. The childhood test is just the beginning. Now that your mind is awakened to your early years, you'll find yourself continuing to probe. But even if you answered all the questions no, don't worry. You might be a late developing witch or warlock, one who didn't exhibit signs until puberty or beyond. So now let the pages turn forward into adulthood. Have you ever experienced ESP? Extrasensory perception is the ability to read the brain waves of another person or the vibrations from an object through other than normal senses. Now, everyone is born with some degree of ESP, but this power is easily inhibited. If people are brought up to think it's unnatural, most people won't try it. But many years ago, Sigmund Freud advanced the theory that forms of ESP were the original means of communication. And ESP, as a means of communication and power, is the goal of modern witches and warlocks, especially in the gray realm. Most ESP goes unnoticed or stops with a turn at the Ouija board, but witches and warlocks know the secrets of turning it on. Now that you know ESP isn't a freak thing, answer the following questions honestly. Have you ever felt that the phone would ring and it did?
Have you ever thought of someone down the block, or for that matter 3,000 miles away, just before they unexpectedly drop in or send you a letter?
Have you ever been listening to someone as they talk and know exactly what they're going to say before they say it?
Has someone ever promised they'd come over to see you, and you got ready for their visit, knowing all the while they weren't coming, and they didn't?
Have you wanted a certain dress or shirt in a store window, but knew that when you asked for it they wouldn't have it in your size and you were right?
Have you ever suddenly had the feeling that some distant relative or friend is sick or has been in an accident, and you call them and discover you're right?
Have you ever met someone for the first time and felt very bad vibrations from him, but for social or business reasons you ignore the feeling, only to have him prove you were right?
Have you ever spent a whole day thinking about this one kind of food, then find that that's what you're going to have for dinner?
Have you ever known that the doorbell or phone would ring as soon as you got into your bath or shower, and when you did, it did?
Have you ever known who someone is before you've been introduced to them?
If you answered yes to 7 or 8 of these 10 questions, you've got a lot of ESP working for you. Have you ever experienced psychic phenomena? This is having a dream come true. It's sometimes called dream predicting. Here's a few questions to probe this area. Have you ever dreamed of someone you haven't seen in a long time, and the next day you hear from them?
Have you ever had a dream involving the death of a friend or someone in your family, and in a short time they pass away?
Have you ever dreamed about a room or a place that you've never seen, and within a few months find yourself in that room or that place?
Have you ever dreamed a dream where the atmosphere, not the place or people, was the predominant thing, and within a matter of months you find yourself overwhelmed by that same haunting feeling of atmosphere?
Have you ever dreamed of a face that you've never seen before, only to meet that person within a few months? Maybe your dreams were slightly different than how it happened in real life, but if you were able to answer 2 of these questions with a qualified yes, you may have psychic phenomena. Have you recently noticed telepathic powers? Have there been times when you've gone into the shower or turned on your bath and heard voices calling you? In many cases, this isn't your imagination or squeaky pipes, but voices from the other life. If it happens often, and the plumber can't find anything to fix, you can bet someone's trying to tell you something. Voices also project themselves through things like motors, so listen closely. The things I've asked you might have happened to anyone. Only you can determine if you think these happenings are more than a coincidence. And even if they haven't happened to you yet, stay alert to all these things, because they might start tomorrow, and they're all excellent signs of being a witch or warlock. Now here's a few interesting tests to give yourself as you begin to explore new areas and develop your powers of ESP and psychic phenomena. Since I can't be there to help you, you'll have to confide in a close friend, as most of the tests require another person. Success or failure with these tests doesn't automatically qualify or disqualify you. I mean, a red flag doesn't drop from the sky and say, "Wow, look at you, you're a witch." These tests have been designed to make your mind more receptive to the new experiences I'll have for you shortly. There are 3 basic ESP tests, and they all require 2 people. One person testing his ESP abilities and the other conducting the test. This other person, by the way, should be highly developed in ESP, or at least very interested, as a non-believer would seriously hamper your progress.
The person who wants his ESP tested should be put into a room with pencil, paper, and clock. All doors to this room must remain closed to prevent distractions. The other person can go anywhere else in the house. Neither of you can smoke or drink during this experiment. During a 1-hour period, the outside person should concentrate on the student's name a certain number of times. When he does, he writes down the exact time. The student must note the exact time he picks up any ESP vibrations.
The first time you do this, if you have the exact time of 1 or 2 out of the, say, 10 times the other person communicated with you, whoopee-doo. Just keep practicing, and you'll quickly increase your percentages. Soon you'll be right over half the time. When you reach or exceed 75% correct on this test, you're ready to advance to ESP test number 2. Now that your ESP has been revived, sit down at a table. Have someone blindfold you. From a magazine you've never seen before, have a friend cut out 10 different pictures. Your helper should number the pictures from 1 to 10, then give them to you one at a time. Hold each picture and study it slowly. Try to see it through the vibrations your mind will receive. Then describe your feelings or impressions out loud. Your friend will write down your impressions. It isn't necessary to describe the picture. What we are looking for is the impression your mind receives. For instance, I gave a picture of Niagara Falls to a 15-year-old student of mine. He didn't say the picture was Niagara Falls, but he did tell me he felt strength, power, and a feeling of falling and coldness. He also said he felt a sensation of loudness, which he couldn't explain. This was an excellent example of successful ESP. The correct impressions when you first begin this test will be very small. If you get 1 right out of the 10 pictures, be happy. The more you practice, the faster your powers increase. When you're able to get over 50% correct, you may move on to ESP test number 3, the most difficult one. Have a friend bring over someone you've never met before. All 3 of you sit in a room. No one but you should talk until the experiment is over. Ask the stranger for something personal to hold. Car keys, a lipstick tube, watch, ring. Obviously nothing that would identify him. Then, holding the object in your hands, close your eyes. Concentrate on the item and what it's telling you. You'll begin to see things belonging to the person. A name, a place, a past, other people, a future, an accident. Say the messages out loud as you receive them. Don't try to rationalize or justify them at the time. The first impressions that come to you will usually be the most correct. If the messages are scarce, do not force additional answers. This will only confuse your train of thought. Never let this test exceed an hour, as your mind will become tired and unable to receive the vibrations. Again, don't be disappointed if your answers are about 20 to 25% correct. This is the hardest ESP test of all. Expect to devote more time to it, but it is a key test, the stepping stone into telepathy. There are no tests for telepathy. When your mind is ready, you just indulge in it. you and other people, especially witches and warlocks, will have an exciting conversation without one word being spoken. It's one of the most stimulating experiences you'll ever have, because your thoughts pour forth and are received without being censored. Telepathy makes the very act of conversation a fantastic trip, and if you have some doubts that it's real, just turn to the Christians. They've been indulging in telepathy for over 2,000 years. Because isn't the act of prayer telepathy? They're mentally communicating with a person's spirit or force that's in another location. No matter how you cut it, that's telepathy. Now for the psychic phenomena test. This isn't a quickie. In fact, you'll have to buy a diary covering a year. Always keep the diary and a pencil close to your bed for your dreams. Each morning, write down your dreams from the night before in as much detail as possible. As the days, weeks, and months pass, certain things will happen that you'll feel have happened to you before. That's when you check your diary and see if, when, and how often you've had this dream. For instance, I had this one dream many times during a year. I was in a car. I couldn't see the face of the man driving. It was always at night and always raining. We were lost and I was looking for a road sign. Suddenly I was lying in the wet pavement. I couldn't get up. I felt I'd fallen out of the car and been killed. A year later, I was driving with my husband. It was dark, raining, and we were off the main highway. As I looked out the car window for street signs, I suddenly realized this was exactly like my dream. Just then, we were hit by an oncoming car. I woke up on the wet pavement. The only thing different from my dream, I was able to get up and walk away. There's no right or wrong answers for psychic phenomena. Just log your dreams and see how many come true. Over the months, you'll determine the strength of your own psychic phenomena. By the way, there have been many cases of people dreaming the same dream several nights in a row. If this should happen to you, don't get alarmed. However, if this recurring dream does come true, it's a strong indication that your psychic phenomena abilities are far above the average mortal. Another exciting test is trying to contact a spirit. That's right, gang. Up to now, we've only been playing within your mind. But now we go outside, way outside, and you won't have to keep score for this one. You're going to know rather quickly how successful you've been. Now, the easiest and safest way to contact a spirit is through the good old, dependable Ouija board. The only problem with the Ouija board is that these spirits are normally earthbound spirits, people who have committed suicides or imps and cadavers. In my opinion, the unfortunate thing is most people still don't know how to use the Ouija board. 2 people must use it, but only one must touch the dial. This person must place all fingers very lightly on the edge of the dial facing the board, with the word Ouija at the top. To block the subconscious from directing the spelling, this person must keep his eyes closed at all times. The second person must sit on the right-hand side of you with a pad and pencil and write down all the letters indicated by the dial. At the top of the board, not on it, but touching it, should be a large white candle in a red holder. Sandalwood incense should be burned before or during the use of the board. This is the safest form of contacting a spirit, because if it's undesirable to you, just pick up the Ouija board and put it away, and that's the end of Mr. Spirit. By the way, to keep the Ouija board working successfully, I have also devised a way of cleaning and storing the board, which I explain in my seance album. Now on to the spirit from the other side, beyond this earth. You're going to try and call forth a spirit from one of the 7 dimensions of the mortal life hereafter. Although anyone can do this fairly simple test, I'd suggest a fair amount of practice on the other tests before you try this one. Place a large white candle in a large red candle holder. On each side of the candle, place sandalwood incense in red burners. You can do this in any room, but make sure the heating and cooling systems, lights, and all electrical appliances are turned off. All draperies, windows, and doors must be closed. Then, wearing a white robe, sit with your legs crossed, hands folded in your lap, and recite the 23rd Psalm, omitting the Amen.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Then close your eyes and say once,
O spirits of the 7 realms of the mortal world, and spirits of the 4 dimensions of the witchcraft world, I beckon you unto me.
Then think of receiving. Think of receiving a spirit from the 4th and 7th dimensions of the spiritualistic world. It will come to you if it believes in you. So believe in it. Believe in the spirits from the 7 dimensions. Think of meeting this spirit. Think of all the questions you have about the other life. This is also done by a black or white high priest or priestess as a display of their strength to their occult members. In this case, the ceremony is usually held on a hill or mountaintop, where the priestess will beckon all the spirits of the world hereafter, who will make their presence known through the wind. 2 torches are placed about 10 feet apart, with 1 incense stand on the outside of the torches. The high priestess steps between the torches and raises her arms and eyes to the sky. She's wearing a white robe and is barefoot. The other occult members are also barefoot and wearing white robes, and are standing in a single line behind the priestess. They have their arms crossed and hands joined together and are swaying back and forth to the rhythm as they hum and chant with her. The priestess faces north as she begins the chant. In answer to her call, the wind begins to slowly come to her. She then turns in another direction, beckoning the spirits from that corner of the earth. As the wind increases in strength, she turns to the other 2 directions, beckoning those spirits and completing her circle. The spirits have now surrounded the occult members and are making the strength of their high priestess felt through the violence of the wind. Many times, especially when you're doing this alone in your early experiments, the only physical signs of receiving a spirit might be a sudden cold chill or draft as it enters the room. Or you may feel as though someone's trying to pull you away from where you're sitting. You may start to rock uncontrollably. The flame on the candle may begin to jump crazily in the closed room. For a fleeting moment, you may actually see something whiz past you like a shadow without a body, or the spirit may make it easy for you and materialize right in front of your eyes, as solid as you or I. No matter how the spirit does it, once it enters the room, be cool. Don't go grabbing at it or jumping around. Let it make the first move. Let it try to communicate with you. It may only be able to rap on the wall or floor, and you'll have to figure out a way to communicate with it. It may be able to write, or it may motion you to pick up a pencil, and it will proceed to write using your hand. Or it may be able to talk. It may want to touch you, but don't you try to touch it. Most spirits are not in solid form, and you may drive it away if you reach for it. It's very unlikely that from this exercise you'll receive an unhappy spirit, since there's nothing satanistic about this particular type of beckoning. A demon is the only spirit who can be harmful, and they'll only appear after prolonged rituals and chants from the black realm. However, if you find the spirit undesirable, or you've suddenly changed your mind about the whole thing, don't panic. There's a really simple way to get rid of any spirit. In fact, it's one of the very few things horror films are right about. If you want to send the spirit back, just invoke the name Lord, or Lord God, or Jehovah. Just lay one of these good names on it and order it back into the realm from which it came. Back it'll go, just like that. In closing your hour of beckoning a spirit or spirits, you must say,
O mortal spirits of the 7 realms of the life hereafter, and spirits of the 4 dimensions of the witchcraft realm, leave this room and house and go back into your own dimensions. Come again only when I call upon you. Amen.
As you practice these experiments and others that I've detailed on other albums, you'll either find them becoming very easy or very boring. If you're getting bored, it's pretty sure you're just a mortal, and that's not too bad. Just try to be more tolerant about witchcraft and a lot of other things. However, even if you still have doubts about being born to witchcraft, but you're enjoying the experiments, let's just assume you could be a mortal who's developing a liking for practicing witchcraft. Don't give up all hope of being a witch or warlock yet. There's a lot more to come. And each time we turn a corner, that cold chill might sweep through you with the realization that you've been down this road before.